Good evening. Welcome to Planning Commission meeting of December 1st, 2021. The meeting is called to order. Due to COVID-19 novel coronavirus and health recommendations from the LA County Health Department, the Planning Commission meeting is being conducted virtually with no members of the public present. The public is encouraged to watch and participate from the safety of their homes and practice social distancing. The meeting can be viewed on local TV and Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire devices. You can also watch it's being streamlined online at the city's website at www.glendaleca.gov. For public comments and questions during the meeting, please call 818-937-8100. City staff will be submitting the questions and comments in real time to the appropriate person. Current Planning Commission agendas are available by visiting our website at www.glendaleca.gov. Can we get a roll call, please?
Yes. Commissioner Trottian?
Here.
Commissioner Fuentes?
Here.
Commissioner Lee?
Here.
Commissioner Shabazian? Chairperson Manassian?
Here. Can I please have the report regarding posting agenda, please?
The agenda for the December 1st, 2021 regular meeting of the Glendale Planning Commission was posted on November 24th, 2021 on the bulletin board outside of City Hall.
Great. Next item is the approval of minutes dated November 3rd, 2021.
So moved.
I'll second it.
I'll second.
Do we have any oral communication for tonight's agenda?
I have no oral communications and there are no callers at this time.
Commissioners, any comments? No? Okay. All right, staff, can we get the agenda for tonight, please? Read the agenda for tonight, please.
Yes, so the first item under 7A, new business, is a use variance at 1650 Victory Boulevard. I am going to turn it over to Case Planner Ani Garibian to walk through the staff report, and then we're ready for the public hearing and any questions.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I just want to make an announcement for the first case. I think I remember hearing and approving the case many moons ago, so I may have to recuse myself for this use variance.
Okay, I didn't quite understand what the commissioner said. She used to be a planner. Okay.
I heard the case.
Okay.
I think 19 or 20 years ago and approved it, so I may have to recuse for this one again.
Okay.
Yes, Commissioner Manassian and members of the Planning Commission, that is our understanding that Commissioner Fuentes was involved in the review of this item some years ago, and while there is not, for example, a financial interest that we're aware of that's related to the prior approval or even with this particular request, there can be a perception of what's called common law bias or sort of a front loading of information or about the particular request, so in the abundance of caution, and here with also the ability of the commission to still maintain a quorum, I believe Commissioner Fuentes will recuse herself on that basis from the hearing of this particular item.
Okay, understood.
Thank you, Commissioner Fuentes.
Thank you.
Yes.
As a housekeeping, I think you wanted to reorder the item B and C.
Okay, yes. Staff, also I like to switch places for item C to be second item, then B to be the third item.
Okay, so just so everybody at home is following, we're putting a little pause on 1615 Victory Boulevard, and we are rearranging the agenda so that it will go in order of 7A, then 7C, and then last will be 7B. So that is going to be the new order of the agenda, and then we will get back to 7A right now at 1650 Victory Boulevard.
Yes.
just to this item, please. Thank you.
That's okay. Okay, the applicant's proposal is for a use variance to allow the continued operation of an existing warehouse and wholesale use on a C3 zoned property located at 1650 Victory Boulevard on the southeast corner of Victory Boulevard and Western Avenue. All of the properties along Victory Boulevard in the immediate area are zoned C3, while the properties on the side streets are mainly zoned R350, 3050, with some horse overlay zones. Okay, so here is the aerial view of the property and a timeline of the property for your reference. Some of this will be discussed in this presentation, and there's more information in the report. Here's a site plan of the property under the previous tenant. And the site plan of the property under the proposed tenant. The project site is a 14,810 square foot lot consisting of 11,700 square foot one-story building located at the southeast corner of Victory Boulevard and Western Avenue. The building is currently operating as a warehouse and wholesale use and has been in operation for 50 years. The previous tenant, CPC, had been operating in this location since June 1997. The proposed tenant, Xander Gregg, would like to continue operating as a warehouse and wholesale use for premium cigars and accessories. This slide shows the front facade of facing Victory. And here's the side street elevation along Western Avenue. The site features at-grade asphalt parking at the rear, consisting of 6 angled parking spaces adjacent to a 20-foot wide alley that runs from Western Avenue and Winchester Avenue. The 6 parking spaces that are directly accessible from the alley were first identified on a site plan, landscaping plan, that was submitted with the use variance case number 8045-U in 1989 and still exists today. The building occupies approximately 80% of the property, so there's no room for additional parking on site. Both ends of the rear of the building feature roll-up loading bays with the on-site parking located between the buildings. Okay, here's this floor plan of the previous tenant and the floor plan of the proposed tenant. In this case, staff believes the required variance findings can be made for the proposed use variance. First, the strict application of the provisions of the ordinance will result in practical difficulties and an unnecessary hardship inconsistent with the general purposes and intent of the ordinance, because the building was constructed as a warehouse with no designated parking required at the time. Currently, the building is legal non-conforming with 6 parking spaces on site. Code requires 1 parking space per 1,000 square feet of a warehouse use, while typical C3 zone uses generally would require significantly more parking. Current code requires 2.7 spaces per 1,000 square feet for office use, which would equal to 32 spaces in this case, and 4 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet for retail personal service uses, which would be 47 spaces in this case. Should the applicant's request be denied, the neighborhood would bear an undue burden of overflow parking in the building, if it was converted to commercial uses. The owner would be faced with either demolishing the existing building that is in good condition or reduce the size to meet parking standards for the C3 zone. Second, there are circumstances or conditions applicable for the property involved to the intended use or development of the property that do not apply generally to other property in the same zone or neighborhood. The warehouse building was constructed 50 years ago when the use was permitted and when there was no parking requirements. The subsequent zoning code amended in 1986 and the introduction of parking requirements have created a challenge for the property owner over the type of uses that can occupy the viable building. A use that conforms to the current C3 zone would require approval of parking reduction permit under today's standards. The city would face a dilemma having to determine whether conforming uses that could require a much greater number of parking spaces. Traffic circulation demands would also create an additional burden on the neighborhood. The existing less intensive land use currently occupying the site allow the property to operate in a manner compatible with the commercial and residential neighbors. The current proposal, as conditioned to eliminate nuisance concerns, is in a better solution. Third, the granting of the variance will not be detrimental to the public welfare of the property or improvements of such zone or neighborhood in which the property is located. The previous warehouse and wholesale use variance case number PVAR-2011-020 and previous approvals had not proven to be detrimental to the community or neighboring properties. The proposed tenant requesting the variance will comply with the conditions of the previous approval. No comments were submitted from other city departments. Neither were comments received from the public regarding this. Finally, the granting of the variance will not be contrary to the objectives of the ordinance. The building was operated successfully first as a permitted warehouse beginning in 1971, and secondly through use variances as a warehouse and wholesale since 1986. The building is being maintained in good condition, and its economic life is expected to continue for many years, and is being operated responsibly with its commercial and residential neighbors. It is a goal of the general plan that all non-conforming uses eventually be replaced with those that conform to current standards. However, in this particular case, the warehouse use was specifically permitted by code when there was no parking requirements. The current parking lot configuration with 6 stalls was first introduced with use variance case number 8045U in 1986, and this is the number most appropriate for the current warehouse use of the building. Denying the request would effectively leave the owner with having no possibility of complying with the parking requirements or even the least intensive commercial uses. The granting of the variance as conditioned will allow this to happen in a minimal negative impacts to the community. Further development of the property will be required to conform to the current codes at the time. This stopped working. Oh, thanks. As mentioned, staff has not received any public comments for this case. Staff recommends the Planning Commission approve the applicant's request subject to the attached findings and recommended conditions of approval. some of which limit the hours of operation and delivery. And one more, please. That concludes my presentation. I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Any questions? No
I
questions.
recommend that we open the public hearing, and if the commission would like to hear from the applicant, I believe that they are on the WebEx. So let the commission decide that.
If we have no questions, then we can take the phone calls. You said there's phone calls for this application?
Chairman Astian, there are no phone calls at
Applicant
this
is
time.
here.
All right, so can we,
It's just the applicant.
The applicant is here. Can you hear me?
yes,
Okay.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Janelle Williams. I'm here representing this application for the third or fourth time, at least the third time. And Edith Fuentes is correct. She did hear the case the last time and the time before. Staff did a lot of work on this, and I appreciate all of that. I've read the staff report and the conditions of approval. And you're correct, the hours of operation will be fewer hours of operation than the prior operator. And delivery hours will be less than before as well. I do have a couple of questions on the draft conditions of approval. Would be, one would be condition number 5. It says, the parking spaces shall be restriped and wheel stops provided. I think that might be a holdover from the last time this case was heard, because the spaces are striped and there are wheel stops provided. And then condition number 14. I wonder if you would consider changing that to that the authorization granted herein shall run with the land and shall be valid until the use is discontinued or the use variance is revoked for violation of conditions. We just like it to, this case has been heard 1986, 1991, 1997, 2001, 2012, and again today. And I wonder if you think that this needs to be subject to any more renewals, as long as the use remains consistent and they abide by all of the conditions of approval. So that's just something I would hope that you would consider on that. And again, since the owner would be faced with either demolishing the building that remains in good condition or substantially reducing its size to meet parking requirements for any use in the C3 zone, the strict application of the provisions of the ordinance will certainly result in practical difficulties and unnecessary hardship inconsistent with the general purpose and intent of our ordinances. The design of the building is not suitable for any other uses. And as Kristen said, it was constructed to serve the use as it is today, warehousing, since 1971. The restrictions and conditions imposed with the grant of the variance will assure that the use operates compatibly with the neighborhood and is consistent with the standards established by the zoning ordinance. And requiring only higher intensity uses with greater parking and traffic circulation demands would also create an extreme burden on this neighborhood. The current owner of the property is here. He is also the operator of the warehouse, and you can ask him questions directly regarding the operation. But with the new operation of this building, we have no idling of diesel engines. We don't have any big rigs anymore blocking the alley. We receive small package deliveries via UPS service. And they're working towards 100% clean fuel deliveries, and they're also adding electric and compressed natural gas. And the deliveries all take place inside of the building as opposed to outside. And there are no pallets or diesel engines running or anything like that. So it's very well situated, it's well operated, and the subject use is compatible with all of the neighboring uses along Victory Boulevard. And as a clean wholesale warehouse use, it's also more compatible than with the neighboring residential uses than such uses as office and retail. Any owner of this property must constantly worry about their investment and livelihood being in jeopardy. That's not consistent with the objectives or the spirit of the ordinance, and that's why we ask for the variance to run without expiration and run with the land use. Employee vehicles are parked on the property in dedicated spaces and not in any public right-of-way. Deliveries are received inside the building, at the rear of the property, off the alley, and not on Western or Victory, or in the alley. What else? The use variance is the minimum necessary to afford the highest and most efficient use of the property and the structure for its function as a clean wholesale warehouse. You know what the prior uses were. The objective of the zoning code is to allow the owner the same rights and privileges to operate similar to other properties, and that's all we're asking for. Just the right to compete fairly for business and operate our business in a clean and safe manner. And appreciate your time. Arthur Berberian is here, property owner and operator, and I'm sure he would like to introduce himself. Arthur.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple of questions.
Go for it.
One to Ms. Williams.
Yes.
Yeah, your concern, you brought up, yeah, it is on. Item number 5, that usually comes with the condition as a maintenance item. What is your issue with that?
Oh, number 5, it's already been striped, and there are already wheel stops there.
Oh, okay, so that's
It's
taken
just,
care of.
I think that was just a holdover from the last one.
And
Yeah.
I'd just like to ask the case planner if she can confirm that.
Yes, but the reason why we left it is to make sure that it is maintained that way.
Okay. And item number 14, I think this is more a question towards city attorneys. Is there a sunset clause on use variance? Because now it's for 20 years, and then prior years it was shorter. So, what is the actual sunset?
I apologize, Commissioner Lee, members of the Planning Commission. I did not draft that particular condition. Don't know whether that was a internal discussion as a proposal. It is certainly within the Planning Commission's discretion to impose a time limit or to consider, as was requested, that this variance run with the land until the use is discontinued or there is a it would, of course, be subject to revocation based on the conditions being violated, for example. So that is within the commission's discretion. And as for condition number 5, I think the intent here is to maintain, as shown on the current plans, in good condition. So if the case is that it has already been restriped, the lot has already been restriped, and wheel stops are provided, that would be included within that required maintenance. So that particular sentence could effectively be deleted and obtain the objective that I think the planning department was trying to achieve.
The property owner has comments to make? Yes?
Good evening. My name is Arthur Bavarian, and we do operate. We've been operating in the city of Pasadena for the last 26 years. A wholesale premium cigar and accessories company. What we do, most of our products actually are shipped in by by manufacturers, and we import our own products as well. And we do service our customers online and by phone. We take orders, we fill them. Most of the packages are smaller than the maximum size, actually, I would say, are 18 by 18. So it's we keep a humidification in our warehouse so that the cigars do not dry. And this way we continue our operation. We do receive via UPS small packages, and most of our packages are once a day we receive them, and once a day actually we ship out. It's anywhere between 8:30 to 4 o'clock to 4:30 maximum. So that's it's quite a clean operation. Extremely, we're careful with our securities, and I think it would be the best fit to the area. And one of the reasons actually we've chosen that is because of the security. Neighborhoods are well, and we like actually to be a part of a good neighborhood. We've met since then. Since we purchased the property, we met a few of the neighbors in the back, and all of them were very happy, very excited actually to have us. And that's the way we operate. Very clean, a very clean operation.
Very well. Any questions from the owner? Staff, can we prepare for?
I think regarding the, 14, I think that's something that I guess we need to kind of discuss. My thought, I think 20 years is very generous. I've seen 10 years in the past. I think one of the reasons why we have sunset clause or the years attached to this type of variances is that to make sure that all the zoning and everything else is consistent with our general plan. And we often go through the amendment to the general plan and review the general plan. And 20 years in planning, I think, is forever. So, I rather say, would like to see 10 years, but since it's 20 years, I'm going with the 20 years.
I completely agree with Commissioner Lee. I think 20 years is pretty generous and should give the property owner, a little bit more, time not to have to worry about this application going through once again. But like the commissioner said, I think a lot of things could change with our planning and zoning regulations within a 20-year period. And I would rather us, seat on the side of caution when we go about this. There's a likelihood parking requirements could change, uses could change, and I would rather, keep it as is, as staff maintained, and I would be ready to move as it was presented to us.
Do we want to delete item number 5?
Appreciate the discussion.
My thought on item 5 is, as long as we keep language that it should be maintained, the fact that it's already been done, I think we can remove that portion of it.
That would be the last sentence of condition number 5 only,
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, last sentence.
just to confirm.
Okay.
So we're going with item number 14. We leave the item number 14 as is, and, yeah, okay.
I'd entertain a motion with those amendments, if that's what the commissioner desires.
So moved.
I'll support the motion.
To clarify, that's only with one amendment, correct? Or is, okay, that's the removal of
Correct,
the last
item
sentence of
five.
condition 5.
Yes.
I have the motion if you guys need me to read it.
We just need a motion and a second, and I'll call roll call.
I think Commissioner Lee
Yeah.
seconded, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Upon review and consideration of all materials and exhibits relative to use variance case number PVAR 2106466 located at 1650 Victory Boulevard, and after having conducted a hearing on said matter, the Planning Commission hereby approves said use variance case number PVAR 2106466 to allow warehouse and wholesale use to continue operation where these uses are not allowed, located at 1650 Victory Boulevard in the C3 Commercial Services Zone, described as lots 1 and 2, tract number 8714 in the city of Glendale, county of Los Angeles, in accord with the findings and amended conditions set forth below, with the adjustment to item 5 as mentioned by staff.
I support. Second.
For roll call, Commissioner Tarachian,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Aye.
Chairperson Manassian.
Aye.
I'm going to ask if we could take a brief recess to make sure we can get Commissioner Fuentes back in. So just a very brief 2-minute recess to make sure she gets back in before we move on to the next item. Thank you. Okay, we're back.
We are back. So next item on agenda, staff?
So the next item on the agenda is item 7C. It's a proposal to establish the Casa Verdugo Historic District Overlay Zone. And I will turn it over to Mr. Jay Platt, Principal Planner and Historic Designer Extraordinaire, and to present this next case.
And do you have some slides for me?
I
Hopefully the
so.
clicker works, right?
This is, there are 4 things. Why are
There we go,
there- Okay,
on the right.
I need to somehow close this guy. There we go.
Okay, cool. So tonight, the Planning Commission is hearing on an advisory basis 2 historic districts that have been in the works for quite a while, 2 very interesting neighborhoods. I wanted to start, it's been a while since the Planning Commission has heard from the historic district world, and a couple of you at least haven't been part of this before. So just a quick introduction, we currently have 7 designated historic districts in Glendale, which are shown on the screen here. And tonight we're considering 2 more, which are highlighted in red. So first we'll talk about Casa Verdugo, and then South Cumberland Heights a little bit over to the left. And then I threw in, just as a little preview, the Bellhurst district, which doesn't read so well, it looks like on the screen, in white, but that will be a 10th historic district that we're going to be considering sometime in 2022, most likely, or 2023, depending on how speedy things go. To refresh or to remind the commission, we have a very elaborate public process to create historic districts. And this goes back to the early days when we were first establishing districts, and there was concern that we wanted to make sure that the decision makers like yourselves understood that there was buy-in from the community and that there were many opportunities for the public to participate. So each of these blue highlighted boxes is a point where there's either a public hearing, a community meeting, and we even do 2 petitions where the proponents, the actual residents of the neighborhoods that you're looking at, go in the old days door to door. These days they did a hybrid, some online work, some door to door actually. And we just want to make sure that everyone understands that, you know, this process is happening and it's a decision that's made and it could go either way and everyone gets a chance to participate. You'll see at the bottom of this that we're at the very end of the process now. So the Historic Preservation Commission met a few weeks ago, also as an advisory body to City Council. They recommended that the district be designated. Tonight, the Planning Commission is hearing it, and then in a couple of weeks, we go to City Council for the introduction of the ordinance and then a final decision in January. And now I have to skip ahead a little bit, so you get a little preview of the other district. Okay, so here's Casa Verdugo. Really interesting history to this neighborhood, very much tied to the early development of Glendale, the early suburbanization, the streetcar, which you see on the picture on the left. What's kind of fun is that the building next to the streetcar there is the old Sepulveda Adobe, which was a very old building that became a restaurant, and it became one of Glendale's premier attractions. It became a major thing, not just for people living here, but in the region. People would want to go to this restaurant to have what they then called Spanish food, but was really kind of more of a Mexican food. And you see on the right another house that we'll look at in a second, so just keep that in mind. Just to show you the rough area where we are, we're just to the east of Brand Boulevard and just south of Mountain Street for this district. The proposed district has 112 single family or 112 properties within it. And you can see the compilation of tract maps on the left. So it's kind of a collage of a few different tracts that were all fairly early in the city's history. Or most of them were early, a couple from the 20s. And then you can see the year builts for the properties that are in the proposed boundary. And the properties that are in red and are kind of some of the earliest houses that we have in the area. And then we also have a lot of properties in orange, which are the 1910 to 1919, which means that's the Craftsman era largely. So this neighborhood has more Craftsman houses in a compressed area than most other parts of Glendale, and that's one of the things that makes Casa Verdugo unique. I mentioned the restaurant. It was called Casa Verdugo. So the neighborhood was named after the restaurant. There was actually a post office there, so it was kind of on the way to becoming a little city, but ultimately became part of Glendale. And a large part of this was due to Piedad Yorba Sol, who you see on the left, who was the restaurateur and the businesswoman who created the Casa Verdugo restaurant, which was originally located in the Adobe and then was moved. She had a dispute with Henry Huntington, and the Pacific Electric Rail Line owned the original Casa Verdugo restaurant, and she ran it. After the dispute, she purchased this house that you see on the upper left, Mission Revival House, that's still standing today as a single-family house and is also listed on the Glendale Register. So this neighborhood, more than many of ours, really kind of visually and tangibly kind of connects to the history of the development of the city. And you see on the right the map of the Pacific line, or the red car line, that ended up in Casa Verdugo. So it was literally the end of the line. Because of the success of the restaurant, there was a desirability for building out the neighborhood, and it became a successful residential subdivision. I mentioned that there are a lot of Craftsman houses in the area, and you see a good example of that on the lower right picture, but it's not all Craftsman houses. So in the 20s and 30s, especially after 1925, a series of styles called period revival styles became popular. So we have American Colonial Revival, we have, well, these two are craftsmen, and then this very interesting, what we used to call eclectic vernacular, but after we did the survey, we're now calling this a neoclassical house, the one on the left. That house is also listed on the Glendale Register. We have Mediterranean Revival, we have Minimal Traditional, Mission Revival, French Revival, Tudor Revival, Spanish Colonial Revival. So you keep hearing revival. These are the period revival styles that many neighborhoods in Glendale have. So this is an interesting mix of the craftsmen with these later styles. And then up to Minimal Traditional and even some more kind of modern looking houses. A few of the properties in the neighborhood are already listed on the Glendale Register. I mentioned Casa Verdugo. We'll see in a second, a few of the craftsman houses are also listed. And here's another shot of Casa Verdugo. So in terms of the historic district process, as I mentioned, it's a long process. It's defined in Title 30 in Section 3025. And the city establishes certain criteria for designation and then also certain thresholds. So part of this public process is learning if we're going to meet these criteria and thresholds, as well as the neighborhood outreach where we try to let everyone know that this is proposed and that it's going to be coming forward ultimately to City Council for designation. So to figure out if we meet all of the things required by the ordinance, the city hires a consultant to do a historic resource survey, which is one of the attachments to the staff report. Architectural Resources Group did the survey for both Casa Verdugo and also the next one you'll hear, South Cumberland Heights. We have 9 criteria for designation. The ordinance requires that you meet one of those. And in the case of Casa Verdugo, the consultant found that it met 5 of them. I won't read these completely, but the idea is that there's something special happening in this neighborhood. There's something different than you might find in other neighborhoods. There's a sense of cohesiveness, of the architecture, of the feel of the neighborhood. Criterion B is an identification with people of historical significance, and Piedad Yorba Sol fits that, was found to be significant for her role, not just with the restaurant, but ultimately the popularization of the neighborhood. And so we meet 5 of the 9 criteria, and then there are several other thresholds that have to be met, and this is done by property assessment that the consultants do, where they don't just compile the excellent history that we have for the neighborhood that's part of the report. And I should mention that the nomination that came in, this is a very grassroots-driven process to create historic districts. The nominations come from the community, not from us looking and suggesting that these neighborhoods be designated. And in the case of Casa Verdugo, the nomination was fantastic. We got a lot of great historical information coming from the nomination itself, so it made the consultants' work a little bit easier, I guess. But it's not always the case that we see this level of research. But the consultant looks at a couple of things specifically to assess whether the district meets the thresholds that we have established. And one of those is, how many contributing properties are there? So before we talk about the contributor versus non-contributor, I'll just mention that period of significance is an important assessment that the consultant makes. It basically is, when did this neighborhood begin development, and when did it not necessarily end development, but when did its significant period of development end? So you'll see we have several decades of development in the neighborhood because most of Glendale didn't just pop up and get built out all at the same time. Almost all of our neighborhoods kind of tell the story of a progression of time and also architectural style. So for Casa Verdugo, we have a period of significance, 1906 to 1957. And then there's a term that's used, contributor or non-contributor. Each individual property is assessed based on whether it contributes to the character of the neighborhood or perhaps has been changed so that it may not continue to contribute to the character. So to be a contributor, you were built within the period of significance, not you, a property, a house was built, and it also retains its integrity, which means it hasn't been changed that much over the years. It still has enough materials on it, it still has enough of the stylistic character-defining features to kind of tell its story. If a property is a non-contributor, it doesn't necessarily mean there's anything wrong with the property. Some people think it's kind of a negative-sounding term, but it's just the term that preservationists use all around the country for historic districts. A non-contributor was perhaps built outside of the period of significance, or it's lost its integrity, meaning it was built in the 20s, 30s, 40s, but so many changes, so many alterations, it just can't tell its story anymore. So in looking at Casa Verdugo, the consultant found that 76 out of the 112 properties are contributors. This brings a total of 68% of the area, and the ordinance requires that 60% be contributors. So we're well above the minimum threshold for designation. There are 37 non-contributors, and there's also one house, which in this image you can see up at the top, there's a yellow flag lot. The consultants couldn't assess that lot, so we just kind of take that out of the count in terms of contributors. I mentioned that there are 2 petitions that are distributed around the community. The first one is just asking the Historic Preservation Commission to authorize a survey. That's already happened, obviously, because we have the survey. The second petition is probably the more important of the 2. It's where the members of the community actually request that City Council designate the district. And the way it works is that each property is counted as one vote, and the owners of that property must each sign on to the petition in order for that property's vote to count. So if you have a couple owning a property together, they both need to sign the petition rather than having kind of a split vote. So we review the petitions when they come in, and I just want to mention again that for both of the districts you're considering tonight, it's been kind of a heroic effort to kind of get out there during the pandemic and make the case for the district and talk to neighbors, distribute educational materials to the neighbors, and also just getting the petitions out. So it's really amazing how well each of the proponent groups did for the 2 districts. Anyways, going back to April 2021, Historic Preservation Commission looked at the draft of the survey, the ARG survey document. They said it looked solid. They had a few comments that ultimately were included in the final version that you have in front of you tonight. Those revisions also include comments from the community. We have a community meeting where people can read the history. They can also read the individual survey forms for their properties. And then they, if they see an issue, sometimes there are mistakes or just questions of judgment. So we try to make sure it's as accurate a document as possible. The proponents got signed petitions in within the deadlines that the city ordinance establishes, and we have 86 properties represented among the petitions. That leads to a 77% support rate for the district. And I should mention that that doesn't mean that 33 or 23% of the district or of the property owners don't support the district. It's very hard to get to everyone. So there are definitely people who don't believe in historic districts, who don't support this specific district, but there are also properties where it was very hard to reach the owners. There may be absentee owners who just didn't get approached somehow. So it's important to bear in mind that that number isn't like a concrete, yes or no kind of vote, but it is a solid number showing support above the 50% required by the ordinance. There was no formal opposition petition submitted. And so basically we go through each of these steps at staff level and we tick off boxes and say they've met each of the requirements established by the ordinance. And then we bring it for the final review. So the Historic Preservation Commission looked at it on November 18th. They voted unanimously to recommend approval. And now the Casa Verdugo Historic District Overlay Zone awaits your decision in terms of whether the Planning Commission would like to recommend this for designation to City Council. That concludes my presentation.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
So I'm assuming the non-contributing parcels are still subject to all of the same discretion under the district as the contributing properties?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have historic district design guidelines that provide property owners as well as staff guidance in terms of what kinds of changes are appropriate. And they're broken down into not just, is it the roof or is it the walls or the windows, but also by style. So we have some very detailed guidance. For contributors, we follow the style section of that document. There's also a section that's for non-contributors. There's more leeway for changes to be made for non-contributors. So we don't have the standards are a little different. The idea being that we don't want to make them less less contributing to, or, well, they're not contributors, but we don't want to change them in a way that would damage the character of the neighborhood, but we do allow changes that may not be approved on a contributing house. So for example, windows, which is a big issue, are treated differently for a non-contributor than for a contributor.
So, but the reason that, for example, some of the edge properties that are non-contributors are still included in the zone is just so that the uses next to the historic properties don't fall too out of line with what the city and the residents are looking for in terms of the neighborhood's character, just
Yes.
from my own knowledge.
Yes, yeah, non-contributors can be in the middle of a district, or they can be at the edge of the district. In general, districts should have clean lines as much as possible. You don't want to kind of gerrymander districts. And it's okay to have non-contributors for exactly the reason you said. There's still some design review thinking in terms of what its impact is to the historic district for those non-contributors at the edge. This district was looked at by the consultant, and the number of contributors here isn't as high as it has been for some other districts. So there was some talk about what if we kind of removed some of the properties from the edge. The Historic Preservation Commission considered that concept and decided that they didn't support it. They wanted to keep the boundary as proposed. Staff supports that decision, so that's part of our recommendation to you as well.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Chang.
Mr. Chair, I'll also point out that we do have, it looks like 5 calls on this specific item.
Commissioner Chang, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Let's answer the phone calls.
Okay, we're going to start with phone calls.
Let me see if any of the proponents
Oh.
are calling in.
5. Okay. Ms. Sigmund Lowry, you are on live with the Planning Commission. Please introduce yourself and go ahead.
Oh, we also have on WebEx, I'm sorry, I didn't see that she had joined. Robin Fye is also with us.
Okay, maybe let's do phone calls. Ms. Sigmund, can you hear me? Hello? Ms. Sigmund? Hello, Ms. Sigmund? You're on live with the
Yeah.
Planning Commissioner. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, please, you're on live. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My name is Paula Sigmund Lowry, and I live in one of the contributing houses. I served on the committee to go through the neighborhood and introduce this project. And obviously, I very much support this, as does 77% of the neighborhood. What this has done is it has offered the neighbors a chance to really get to know each other and to look at not only their own properties, but the properties around them. And it has turned us from just being a neighborhood of houses to a community of neighbors that care about each other. So we've gotten to know each other. We've had get-togethers with the neighborhood, and it's really been a wonderful process for these last 4 years it has taken to get to this point. So I really hope that you support establishing the Casa Verdugo Historic District overlay zone. Thank you.
Chair, do you want to continue with phone calls?
Well, Robin is one of the proponents. We usually start with them, but your call.
I'm
Let's
Gonna
start
ask the
with them.
chair.
Yes,
We'll go to WebEx.
yes.
Okay, so I'm going to ask who wants to go first.
Like it's Robin and then Sean, maybe?
Okay,
go?
Robin, I'm going to have you go first. We cannot hear you. It doesn't show not muted. Robin, can you try speaking again? I'm sorry, we can't hear you. I'm going to ask maybe if you can rejoin, and we'll move on to the next person and see if this fixes the issue. Thank you, Robin. And Jay, I'll ask you who you want
And
to go.
Sean Brissell?
Then I'm going to ask Sean Bursell, would you like to go next? And hopefully we can hear you.
Certainly.
Excellent, we can hear you.
Great. Thank you very much. I actually, I'm one of the applicants along with Robin and Laurel Perlman. And I wasn't going to speak tonight. I was just going to answer any questions that you might have about the historic district. But since Robin seems to be having some technical difficulties, I just want to say we have a tremendous group in the neighborhood that has been working on this. Paula said 4 years. It's actually will be 5 years in April, and actually we started a little bit before that. Mr. Platt has summarized the historic district very well as he does. You have the report from ARG, which I thought was one of the best reports I've ever read on a historic district. By the way, I should have said I was a resident of Casa Verdugo for 20 years. I now live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and am one of the applicants for the historic district, as Mr. Platt mentioned. I was also executive director of the Glendale Historical Society for a number of years, so I'm very familiar with historic districts in Glendale. And have participated in the establishment of a number of them. And as I was saying, I think the ARG report on Casa Verdugo is really one of the best that I've ever read. And it really makes a very strong case of why Casa Verdugo should be a historic district, given its role in the history of Glendale in creating streetcar suburbs, the architectural diversity in Casa Verdugo that Mr. Platt mentioned, and particularly the fantastic concentration of craftsman houses as well as period revival houses. It's just incredible. If you're not familiar with the neighborhood, it's just you kind of go into this little corner up there at the foot of the mountains, and it's its own special place. And because of the streets, it's not an area that people go through a lot. You have to kind of want to go there, and it's a very special place, and it's been well preserved. The integrity of the houses in the neighborhood are incredible. So because of the history that is there with the Casa Verdugo restaurant, the streetcar suburbs, the architectural, the fantastic architecture, and showing the various periods of development, architectural development in Glendale, it checks all the boxes for a historic district. And as Mr. Platt mentioned, it has 68% contributors, which is above the 60% and a very solid number for a historic district. And 77% of the residents of the district have signed the petitions asking that the district be established. So we recommend that you recommend the City Council for approval of the Casa Verdugo Historic District. Thank you.
Staff, can we ask the callers to keep it for under a minute, please? Since we have other.
I will ask the chair to make that announcement of how brief you would like callers and speakers to talk.
Please keep your comments less than a minute or so. We have a lot of callers and we have other agendas. Thank you very much.
Okay, and I see that Robin has rejoined us. I'm going to see if we can try this again. So please go ahead, Robin.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Can you
we
hear
can hear
me?
you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Chairman Ossian, thank you. Members of the commission and staff, I'm Robin Fye, and I'm the chair of the Historic Preservation Committee of the Ross Moyne Mountain Homeowners Association, and I'm also one of the applicants of the Casa Verdugo Historic District. What began in a living room as a meeting of 9 neighbors in October of 2016 eventually turned into a committee of 18 dedicated volunteers whose commitment, teamwork, and untold hours of effort have all resulted in us finally being before you here tonight after 5 very long years. Challenges aside, ultimately, it was the fact that the people who live in Casa Verdugo appreciate our irreplaceable architecture, our massive old shade trees, and the incredible history of our neighborhood. And most of them had no idea about that awesome history until we shared the stories of it on their porch with them. I had a whole spiel about the history, but Jay did such a great job explaining that all to you. I will spare you. But one cool thing I do want to point out is that weird little platform that still stands at the intersection of Brandon Mountain is a remnant of the railway system that was built specifically to bring people in 1906 to the restaurant of Casa Verdugo. And the Casa Verdugo Historic District Committee and an overwhelming majority of homeowners fervently hope you agree that Casa Verdugo is worthy of preservation, and we hope you vote to recommend our Historic District Overlay Zone to City Council. Thank you very much.
The platform that Robin mentioned is Glendale's most historic bathroom. So,
We're classy in Casa Verdugo.
Microphone?
and then Laurel is on WebEx.
I'm going to have
Yes.
Laurel go next. You're on.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, well, great. I won't belabor some of the points that have already been made, but I do want to just say that I'm thrilled that we've come to this moment. We actually kicked off the historic district proposal and the effort in my living room in our house, and it has been a really wonderful process. As my neighbor Paula noted, it's been a great community builder. We felt very connected to our neighborhood, having lived here for the past 23 years already. But over the few years that we've been working on this initiative, we've gotten to know even more people in the neighborhood, all of whom appreciate the fact that a historic district does not mean that it's stuck in time and it's old and shabby, but that the neighbors all wish to maintain unique character and preserve something that actually becomes timeless because of its appeal with all the different architectural styles. I just wanted to say that during this effort too, with our neighborhood night out event this last August, we became even more aware of how many surrounding neighborhoods and blocks of homes, single family homes, apartments, condominium dwellers, all the other residents, all these other Glendalians approached many of us at our neighborhood night out meeting, wanting to know how they could help support this effort. Even though they can't sign petitions because they don't live here, all of these people in the surrounding areas love to walk, jog, bike, drive through, and enjoy what is really a beautiful, peaceful, classic neighborhood. So it was wonderfully gratifying to know that we had the support not only of 77% of our homeowners, but we had the support of many of our neighboring communities as well, who all kind of joined with us to make this a wonderful connected community. So I would hope that the members of the commission see fit to honoring the wishes of all of these residents who've worked so hard on the initiative and who really care about maintaining the uniqueness, the community, the connection that we have here in Casa Verdugo. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Let's answer a couple of more telephone calls and then we can
Okay, so we have 4 telephone calls, and I'll ask everyone to try and keep it to a minute, please.
Please, yes.
Okay, next we have.
1 minute, not 2 minutes.
1 minute. Ms. Chappelle, you're on live with the Planning Commission. Please go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you for hearing us. We join this evening to support the historic designation. We joined the movement to petition for historic designation of Casa Verdugo District wholeheartedly. I also went door to door for signatures recently. We ourselves are newcomers. We've been here 3.5 years, but we selected our home in this neighborhood for the energy and character of this contained environment that is so well kept and with architecture almost all of historic beauty and value. This neighborhood, my husband and I very much want this neighborhood preserved and protected so we can feel assured we made the right investment emotionally as well as financially. Our home has just received historic designation. It's the neoclassical architecture with actually still an old and different house number on the gable. And we have reason to believe that it was the first house that began being built in this region. And we just love this neighborhood for all its beauty and like to keep it that way. So we very much hope you will vote us in.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next caller, Miss Babbitt, you're on live with the Planning Commission. Please go ahead.
I'm sorry?
Is this Miss Babbitt? You're on live with the Planning Commission. Please go ahead.
Yes, but before I talk to them, I was calling in for the Cumberland Heights District. Not that I don't also support Casa Verdugo.
Okay, then I'm sorry, I thought you were for 7C. I'm going to put you on hold and we'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Ms. Hartwell. You're on live with the Planning Commission. Please go ahead.
Thank you. This is Lori Hartwell, and I just wanted to request that the committee support this Casa Verdugo Historic District. Our house just turned 100 years old, and when people visit it, they can't believe how beautiful this neighborhood is. I can look out my window, and across the street, there are stairs where horses used to drop people off for their house, so there's a lot of little historical facts. This is a beautiful neighborhood. People come to it because it takes you back a little bit, but it's still current. And I just want to give a shout out. I am a member of the committee, and during COVID, I want to thank everybody who shared their eggs, and I shared toilet paper with them. So we all benefited from this, and I think that, you know, you walk around this neighborhood, and we're a neighborhood. And I please vote to support this historic district.
Thank you very much.
And that appears to be all for the callers on this item for Casa Verdugo.
Any questions, quick?
Well, Mr. Chair, kudos to those committee members for your hard work. With that, I'd like to make a motion. The Planning Commission of the City of Glendale, after having reviewed and considered the materials of current record relative to the proposed Casa Verdugo Historic District Overlay Zone, case number PZC 1726288, does hereby recommend to City Council that the overlay zone be adopted as proposed.
Vote.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second, yes.
I'll second that.
All right.
Yes.
Whichever one, staff, for the second.
Yeah.
Whichever, whoever.
So Commissioner Trachian,
Yes.
Commissioner Fuentes,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Aye.
Chairperson Manassian.
All right.
Thank you.
Staff, I'd like to recuse myself for the next item and
And
pass
hand the gavel over to the Vice Chair,
Yes.
Mr. Commissioner Lee.
please.
No need to move if you don't want to.
Is there no, would there be a statement that you would
Would you
like to put into the record as purpose for the?
Yes, the purpose is
recusal?
that, I live in Ardevon Heights, and that's the reason I like to recuse myself.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very
Thank
much,
you very
Mr.
much.
Chair.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Okay, moving on to item 7B. We'd like to hear from the staff. Mr. Pratt?
Let me get to show. Oh. Hold, please.
Oh, thanks, yeah. About my mic? Yeah. Yeah. All right, so here we are looking at, on the right, an outline of the proposed South Cumberland Heights Historic District Overlay Zone. On the left, just to give you a little context, you see the Brand Mansion, Brand Library up at the top. The area of the historic, and so that's Grandview, the street going straight up toward the Brand House. And the neighborhood that we're looking at is kind of south of this, but I showed this to just show there is a connection, a tangential connection with Leslie Brand. And also you see what this area looked like before anything was built here. This was all orchards, this was all farmland, and that's pretty typical of a lot of our neighborhoods up along the foothills of the Verdugos. To give you the context of where we are, the proposed district is south of Cumberland Road, east of Grandview, and then runs along Highland on the west, and then down to Kenneth Road at the south. For those of you who've been focused on historic districting in Glendale, you might recall that there was a Cumberland Heights district proposed in 2003, 2004 that encompassed the entire area that you see on the map in front of you. That district didn't go forward. The city didn't have the guidelines ready. The ordinance wasn't as clear as it could have been. So we kind of stopped looking at the big picture or the big district, created the guidelines and the brand new ordinance at the time. And then over the last number of years, pieces of the former Cumberland Heights district have been brought online as historic districts. So starting with Ardeven Highlands on the right in 2009, North Cumberland Heights in 2012, and now South Cumberland Heights that you're looking at tonight. And the thing to note is all three of these districts are kind of tied together. They have a very similar developmental history. Again, the map on the left, and then looking at the houses, this neighborhood's a little different than what you just looked at in Casa Verdugo, where we see a lot of the orange properties and a lot of the yellow properties. This means this neighborhood doesn't have a lot of craftsmen. And where you see the red properties, which are craftsmen, two of those, I believe, were moved to the neighborhood, so they weren't developed as part of this neighborhood's history. But there's a great wealth of these period revival styles in South Cumberland Heights. And just running through the list again real quickly, but these are examples from this neighborhood. There's a real strong representation of Spanish colonial revival. That's probably the predominant style in the neighborhood. But we also have Mediterranean revival, the craftsmen that I mentioned. We have some traditional ranches, modern ranches, American colonial revival, Monterey revival, Tudor revival, again, all these revivals, French eclectic, we skip the revival, but go with the French, minimal traditional, and then again, we have some of these houses are among the best architectural examples we have in Glendale, so they've already been listed on the register, on the Glendale Register. So we have the Stanford House, the Ben Lomond House, the Worley House, again, just very excellent representatives. One thing I didn't mention is if a property's already on the Glendale Register, it would still be a contributor in the district if it was built in the period of significance. And obviously on the Glendale Register, we don't have to worry about the integrity. So in terms of ARG's survey work, again, the same firm that did Casa Verdugo, they found that this district also meets 5 of the 9 criteria. And they also found that they met the same criteria that Casa Verdugo, which is not common. There's a lot of overlap in this aspect of studying the districts. This one also meets criterion B, and I wanted to mention that that's because of Dan and Arthur Campbell, brothers who worked alongside and for, at some points, Leslie Brand. So that's where the Brand connection is a little tangential, but Dan and Arthur Campbell did a lot of the subdivisions and ultimately were responsible for a lot of the development in the neighborhood. Both of them lived in the area, but they didn't live in South Cumberland Heights. They had houses in Ardeven Highlands. So we meet 5 of the 9 criteria. And then again, the consultant studied the period of significance. This one's a little more compressed, 1922 to 1960. I described or defined what contributors and non-contributors were. This neighborhood has 163 contributors, and I forgot to mention that we're looking at 216 properties overall for this South Cumberland Heights. So in this case, we have 75% of the properties are contributors. Ordinance requires 60%, so again, well above that. 52 non-contributors, and same thing, 1 flag lot house wasn't evaluated. Thinking about the second petition, this was authorized by HPC also in April 2021. We've moved these 2 districts through. Their applications came in close to each other and they've moved through the process kind of together. The petitions were returned within the required deadlines. 123 properties were represented on those petitions. So out of the 216, that means 57% of the properties are identified on the petitions as supporting designation, and the ordinance requires 50%. So again, we're above the threshold that we've established. There is no opposition petition. All of the other requirements have been met for this neighborhood. HPC also reviewed this on November 18th and recommended that City Council approve the designation. And so that is the recommendation that we are making for the Planning Commission tonight, that you also recommend that City Council vote to establish the South Cumberland Heights Historic District Overlay Zone. And I'm available for your questions if you have any.
Any questions from the commissioners? I have one question. There was an email from Annette Banks that talked about 1400 block of Idlewood that she thought was had many contributing homes there. So I know that including that 1400 block would be kind of look like gerrymandering with a little tail there. So can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I actually met with Ms. Banks. Now I'm confused. It seems like today, but I think it was yesterday. But recently, she came to the office and we spoke. She has gained support from a lot of the neighbors on her block, and it is a lovely block, as are many of the blocks south of the proposed district. Unfortunately, coming in at this point, it's too late in the process. It wasn't included in the survey, so we don't have an assessment of contributors versus non-contributors. It might change the period of significance. But one thing I should mention to the commission is that City Council a number of months ago directed us at staff to consider a streamlined historic districting process, because as you saw in that chart I showed, it's quite cumbersome. And as you've heard from the proponents, it's taken a long time, and that time's kind of expanded over the years rather than compressed. So we, hopefully in the first quarter of 2022, will bring something to City Council with some recommendations for streamlining. So I advise Ms. Banks to kind of follow that closely and check in with me, so that the idea is we either might have a way to just have a shorter process for new districts that are proposed, or a way to expand existing historic districts, which in her case would probably be my recommendation. But first we'd have to see if the story that her neighborhood tells shares the history and the story of South Cumberland Heights. So we can't just say, pretty neighborhood, let's expand the district. We have to kind of make the case for it. But she understood where I was coming from and where the city stands on that, and I think she'll be very active as we move forward. So. And we also heard from at least one of her neighbors, so there's definitely interest.
Well, Mr. Pratt, thank you for the explanation. If there are no other questions from the commissioners, can we go to a public hearing?
We can. We have 6 callers on the line. Do you have a time recommendation?
Yeah, so same as before. 1 minute each, please.
1 minute?
Yeah.
There is. You want to talk to the microphone?
One of the district proponents is on the line, and we sometimes give them an extended period, not forever, but
yes,
if you choose.
Yeah, if it's a applicant or representative speaker, yeah, let's allow 2 minutes for the speaker.
Mr. Tarabelli, you're live with the Planning Commission. Please go ahead. Hello, can you hear it, Mr. Tarabelli? Okay, I'm going to put you back on hold, and hopefully maybe you can call back or we can check again. I'll go to the next person on the phone. Ms. Babbitt, thank you for waiting. You're on live at the Planning Commission. You have 1 minute.
Well, I'm not going to be long. I just wanted to share my support for all of the historic districts that are up and coming, and especially Cumberland Heights, as I was one of the original members who created historic districting here in Northwest Glendale. I love all the neighborhoods. Of course, my heart is dear to Cumberland Heights, and I hope that our council agrees. And thank you, Jay Platt, for all of the hard work you do, as well as Mr. Taraborelli and Derek. Thank you so much.
I'm going to try and go back to Mr. Terabelli.
Yes,
Can
I'm
you-
here. Sorry, it was the delay between the TV
Okay.
and my phone.
Okay, well, you're on live now with the Planning Commission. If you can mute maybe your background, we'll be able to hear you.
Okay, so hi and good evening to the commissioners and everyone listening. I am Mark Tabarelli, and I've lived in Glendale for 26 years now and within the proposed district for 22 years. I'm also one of the proponents on the application for South Cumberland Heights District from February 2017. I'm originally from Seaford, New York, a small town on the south shore of Long Island, which was established in 1644. And what attracted me to Glendale was the distinctive period homes, which reminded me so much of my hometown. To know that about 44% of our homes in the proposed district over the next several years will be 100 years old is just extraordinary in my mind. Whenever I have friends visit, they always comment about what a cool area we live in and that they never knew Glendale had such classic homes. These homes should be respected for the uniqueness, charm, and how they represent the deepness and ties to the city of Glendale's distinguished history. I also appreciate the city recognizes not to freeze change within the proposed district, but to do it with balance to allow homes be maintained for current today's lifestyles, yet keep the architectural references of the home's street-facing views. I see this as a win for everyone. I've also been on the petition signing phase and reminded many times as I met my neighbors in the district that they too love the area for the same reasons. While numerous thanks go to many people that got us this far, I'd like to call out Jay Platt for his guidance over the years through the historic district process. With 57% of the homes signing the petition in favor of the district during tough times with the COVID pandemic, I ask for your help, support, and approval in forming the 8th or 9th Historic District, South Cumberland Heights. Thank you, and have a good night.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Fawad, you're on live with the Planning Commission. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I'll be brief. My name is Peter Fawad, and I'm president of the Northwest Glendale Homeowners Association. Our Homeowners Association strongly urges the Commission to recommend the approval of this district to the City Council. With this district, a major portion now of Northwest Glendale will be protected. And alluding to Mr. Platt's history he mentioned a few moments ago, I live in the Art Evans Highlands Historic District, and when we formed that, we just hoped that the neighborhoods around us would join in, and finally, people to the west of us are doing just that. I certainly hope that other neighborhoods in our area also are able to form a district. And then finally, thanks to the many volunteers who shepherded this district through what can be a rather daunting process, I'm pleased to hear that council and staff are working on a simpler process. So I'd like to thank those folks who shepherded this to the city, and also thanks to the city staff, especially Mr. Platt, for the help and guidance on this. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Nickinson, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. You're on live with the Planning Commission.
Hello, good evening, Commissioners. My name is Kathy Nixon. I live in the proposed historic district. This area has an abundance of character and charm, and I'd love to see this motion approved as the best way to preserve these qualities. The great majority of the residents in the area support the proposed district. Please approve the motion and send this initiative to the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Tazian. You're on live with the Planning Commission. Please go ahead. You have 1 minute.
Thank you for hearing this. My name is Serap Tazian. I'm part of the group here that is in support of the historic districting. I moved here 14 years ago. What attracted me was the architecture, and the preservation piece has been, as well as the historic districting, has been a topic of conversation for many years in this neighborhood, in these blocks, and I support it, and I'm hoping that you guys recommend this and support it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Clawwater, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. You're on live with the Planning Commission. Please go ahead. You have 1 minute.
Hi, yes, my name is Ken Clawwater, and although I don't live in the South Cumberland Heights proposed historic district overlay zone, I live really close, like a couple streets over, and so I drive through it all the time, and I just see how beautiful and how much architectural integrity is there. My husband and I have lived all over Southern California, from Silver Lake to the Hollywood Hills. And I got to say, this is really a charming, special neighborhood. And it would be a shame if Glendale didn't recognize it for the specialness that it possesses. So I strongly urge for the establishment of the South Cumberland Heights Historic District Overlay Zone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Dubé. You're on live with the Planning Commission. Please go ahead. You have 1 minute.
Hi, my name is Eileen Doobie, and my husband and I actually love this neighborhood so much that we own 2 homes in the proposed South Cumberland Heights district. As a matter of fact, when our second home on Highland Avenue was originally included in the proposed district, we live on Glenview, which is a little tiny tail end that was added. It has little stripes on it on the map because we were added after, because my neighbors and I begged to get in to the plan. So we enthusiastically support the proposed South Cumberland Heights Historic District, and we hope that you move forward to approve it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think we're down to 2 more. Next, we have Mr. Cateo. You're on live with the Planning Commission. Please go ahead. You have 1 minute. Mr. Cateo? Hello, Mr. Cateo. You're on live with the Planning Commission. Put on hold and we'll go to the next one. Okay.
Hello?
Hi, you're on live with the Planning Commission. Please state your name. You have 1 minute.
Hi, this is Derek Cattell. I'm one of the applicants of South Cumberland Heights Historic District. And I do apologize. I was planning on joining via WebEx, but I had a last-minute work commitment that popped up. First of all, I'd like to thank Jay Platt and city staff for the progress, as this has been a pretty long road to get us to where we are today. This journey for me started over 20 years ago as part of a grassroots movement that eventually paved the way for historic districts to even exist in Glendale. Back in the early 2000s, a group of neighbors from the larger Cumberland Heights neighborhood got together and petitioned City Council to have staff develop the historic district guidelines to allow historic districts in Glendale. South Cumberland Heights would be, if approved, the final neighborhood to be designated from the larger original Cumberland Heights movement. The recent ARG Historic Resource Survey found our neighborhood does indeed qualify for historic designation. And to date, the South Cumberland Heights Committee has completed and met all required tasks and steps for historic districting, for the historic districting process. We are seeking your approval to allow us to move forward so we can hopefully become the next historic district. Thank you for your time, and please approve us to move forward to the next step, which is hopefully City Council. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, that is all the callers that I have.
So if there's no more public hearing, then we'll close the public hearing. And we're going to discussion deliberation. Commissioners, nothing? Any questions? Then I'll entertain the motion.
I can second.
Well, I'm asking for a motion.
I can move.
Okay.
Do we have a second before we move?
I'll second it.
Okay, so Planning Commission of the City of Glendale, after having reviewed and considered the materials of current record relative to the proposed South Cumberland Heights Historic District Overlay Zone, case number PZC 1726236, does hereby recommend to City Council that the overlay zone be adopted as proposed.
Commissioner Trachin?
Yes.
Commissioner Fuentes?
Yes.
Vice Chair Lee?
Aye. With the 4 over 3 to 0, it passes. Recommendation to the City Council. Next item is Community Development Department updates.
The Community Development Department has no updates at this time.
Well, then, someone can move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Okay, thank you. Adjourn.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.